This is my comfort blanket from when I was a child. And at this point, it is really pretty much falling apart. But it was sewn for me by my grandmother's best friend, Agnes. And you can really see from the inside of it, this like kind of beautiful stitching made of these rags that she pieced together and made into this whole for me. And, you know, I didn't know her very well at all, kind of from a distance, you know. I kind of would see her on occasion, get-togethers, and she was a very sweet woman, but, you know, why did she spend a year making a blanket for me? And I wonder if she was in a group, you know, of ladies that might have gotten together and sewn. But I love this so much. I mean, as a baby, I was inseparable. This was my, I took it with me everywhere for the first 5 years of my life. So I feel as though even now, holding it, it contains something essential of my childhood. Some essential aspect of my human self is embedded inside of these old rags, you know, from tears, saliva, memories, fear, the anxiety of being a child. And also, it is something that I can't believe, looking at this, how much my work has in some way been inspired by this. Not deliberately, but just how this blanket has literally embedded itself into me. And everything from the fact that it's made of this grid pattern to, of course, the fact that it's a craft, that it's quilting. And I make art using a craft material, kind of working with a craft métier, working with glass beads and with sewing and weaving. The fact that it's a quilt that she was most probably working in community when she sewed it together, and the way in which over the years I've worked in many different communities with different women's groups, and all the way from working in my studio in LA to working in South Africa with women who are highly skilled bead workers, and the way in which my practice evolved over the years to incorporate saliva. And for example, when you take the thread and you wet it with saliva in order to pass the thread through the needle, how then that saliva on that thread, as you pass it through the material, actually imprints the material and leaves behind a kind of residue, a kind of stain. So, you know, obviously I was not thinking about my baby blanket when I've made all of these works. And yet somehow this object, which I've had my entire life, which I lay on as an infant, as I was laying into it, staining it, changing it, tearing it apart through, you know, all the holding and the loving, it too was wending its way up inside of me. And recently I found this. So I was cleaning up like a maniac, like most people right now in this time of having time alone to ourselves. And I came across this, and I was so struck by finding my baby blanket, you know. And of course, you know, the first thing I did was just, you know, hold it in my arms, and it was so kind of poignant and sad to have this thing in my arms after all these years. For one thing, the fact that it's a complete and total rag, but also just having this thing at this moment in time when I'm thinking so much about how to comfort, you know, how to bring comfort to my family, my child, what brings comfort, and then all of these years later to have this symbol of what brought me comfort, felt to me to be so kind of sad, so kind of kind of also hopeful in the sense that here it is, you know, all these years later, it's still here, it still remains through every single thing that I ever went through. And of all the times in a person's life when you have no control, when things are so completely out of control, it truly is when you are an infant. I mean, people think nowadays about being out of control and having like, what's going to happen next? And yet, you know, as babies, we had absolutely zero control. And yet here we all are. It kind of all worked out. It worked out okay. So it was kind of a really, kind of an amazing reminder of sort of kind of a certain kind of power of the human spirit. And also a reminder of kind of the beauty of a really simple activity, the beauty of care, the beauty of process, of one at a time with needle and thread. It was possible for Agnes to piece together this whole, this object that would come together to become a blanket, which on a purely physical, tactile level creates comfort, perhaps was comforting to make, and then 50 years later, here it is.